Reshoring is America first, so you want your companies to go back to the United States. So when you want to go back to the United States, you will create jobs in the United States, you will pay all the taxes in the US, etc., etc. So from the very beginning, he was asking companies to go back. Today, the result is the following one. According to the Reshoring Initiative, which is one institution which has been set in the United States in order to measure what is the number of companies going back and what is the number of jobs which have been created, we have close to 1,400 companies which announced to go back in 2018. This is the latest results that we have. And you can be sure that Donald Trump will use this in his election campaign, because he will say this is a concrete result of my action. I am asking companies to go back, and they definitely came back. However, 145,000 jobs may be big for many countries in the world, but not for the United States. In the US, according to various estimates, they create about 3 million jobs per year. So 145 maybe is not very big, but of course he will not talk about the 3 million, he will talk about this in order to show how he delivered, how he was very efficient in delivering this. From the business point of view, if you are pulling out of China, you are not necessarily going back to the US. You will try to find another country where you will go in order to continue your business. So A.T. Kearney, a consultancy agency, has come up with this report, which is looking at where would American companies go if they are leaving China. So it's very interesting because they have identified a certain number of Asian countries. So according to this report, which is available on the net, it is free of use, very interesting to look at, there is one country which has benefited most, and this country is Vietnam. So this is where massively the American companies that decided to go out of China, this is where they are going to. There are many reasons for that. Among others, close to China. Second thing, their infrastructure from the legal point of view or from the physical point of view is very interesting. So this is why they don't hesitate to go to Vietnam. So currently, Trump is looking at this and he is not happy. So we can expect that very soon we will have taxes on Vietnam, because he will not permit that you are pulling out of China just in order to find another country where you go to. He will prefer for you to go back to the United States. But if you are operating a company, and if you are looking for, let's say, your cost structure, if you are looking for your profits, maybe the United States is not the first country you will go to. Maybe you are going to some others, especially if you are looking at the labor cost. So the labor cost has been analyzed by the Japanese. This is the Japan External Trade Organization, and they are giving you the comparative cost for different positions: manufacturing, non-manufacturing, manager, worker, etc. And if they didn't put here the United States, it means that they are only putting the Asia-Pacific and adding Australia and New Zealand for that. And according to this, China is not among the cheapest ones. It is in the upper category. So it means that even if Donald Trump did not ask them to pull out of China, maybe they would do it by themselves, spontaneously. Because you know that the cost in China is increasing year after year, and for many of them, they could look at the opportunities which are given by the other countries. And Vietnam is also not among the cheapest ones. However, when we look at the combination of the labor cost and the infrastructure that you have there, the ease of doing business there, it is probably the best destination for the companies which want to leave China. The third one is decoupling. So decoupling is much more, I would say, much more hard to mitigate. Why so? Because if you are looking at reshoring, let's say that I'm moving my production unit to Vietnam, which is, I don't know, 200 kilometers away from my previous manufacturing unit in China. I'm going there. And let's say that after 5 years, things are changing. I can come back because it's not far away. I'm coming back to China. With decoupling, it's hard to come back. What does it mean? It means first that you are breaking the bilateral and the multilateral free trade agreements. So this happened when here in Southeast Asia or in Pacific, they wanted to implement the TPP, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And this Trans-Pacific Partnership was giving possibility to many countries to operate like in a free trade area. So he is pulling out of that. The second one that we have here is NAFTA, so it's not in Asia, but it's the same thing. And the last one is KORUS, which is with South Korea. So it means that Trump has this tendency to eliminate the free trade agreements, and in that case, he has full freedom how to deal with these countries. So that's one thing when we're looking at decoupling. The second one is when you are breaking the supply chains. On this graph, also coming from how much, so this is why I like this site very much. And you can see what the United States is buying from China and what China is buying from the United States. And you will find out that sometimes we have complementary elements and sometimes completely different points. So the US is massively buying electronic equipment or finished products which are coming from China. And China is buying something else. They're buying aircraft, they're buying soya beans, they're buying something else, sometimes chips also for the electronic industry. So if you have this kind of thing, and if you are saying you are decoupling, decoupling means the couple doesn't work anymore. So it's like a divorce. So it means you are not continuing with China from the American point of view, you are not continuing with the United States from the Chinese point of view. So if you don't trade with them anymore, you have to find alternatives to this. So how can the United States find an alternative to all this electronic equipment if they're not buying them from China? That would be very difficult because sometimes you don't have a choice. You have to deal with the Japanese, with the Chinese. The second thing is when China is buying from the US, so here you have aircraft, usually it will be Boeing. So the alternative can be Airbus, but we have to see if it is a real alternative to that or not. So we can say that there is an alternative for the soya beans. You can go to another country in order to find them, but again, we have to see if it is available, what is the quality, what is the price, and so on. So it's not easy to decouple. However, this is something that they would like to do. And for many American companies, it is not easy. For instance, when Trump has decided to ban Huawei, he has said, you don't sell to Huawei anymore. Okay. But some companies in the US are dependent on China extremely. For instance, if you look at this company here, which is Qualcomm, Qualcomm is manufacturing chips for the industry, semiconductor chips. And for 67% of its sales, it depends on China. For this one, NVIDIA, 53. For Texas Instruments, 44. Intel, 42. So if you are telling them you don't sell to China anymore, can they find an alternative? That's practically impossible. So it means that they are extremely dependent on China and few companies in China. And Huawei is one of them. Up to 2018, Huawei was buying from the United States on average for about $12 billion per year. $12 billion. So if you are Intel, or if you are Micron, or if you are Qualcomm, what will you do? You will go to see Trump, and you will tell Trump, look, if you continue with this, we can close the company. So not only there will be less jobs, etc., okay, but electronics is not only for the civilian use, it is also for the military use. So it means you won't have American production for the American army. You will have to buy to another country, and this will put a security threat on the United States. So this is how they're blackmailing a little bit Trump by saying, we have to continue to sell to the Chinese. Do you think that he accepted or not? What do you think? Yes, he is a businessman. So he has introduced exceptions. So this is the exception. The U.S. Department of Commerce extends Huawei 90-day reprieve from third time. Reprieve means exception. So it means that the companies, so it is a little bit schizophrenic. On one side, you are establishing a ban on Huawei, and immediately you are giving exceptions to this ban. So for some companies, he's saying, okay, you can continue to sell to Huawei. This is for decoupling. And the last thing, I'm sorry, I have to go quickly for this. The last thing is bifurcation, and I will stop there. So bifurcation is different from decoupling. Decoupling just means China and US don't trade with each other. That's okay. But bifurcation means that you will systematically build standards which will be different, incompatible standards. So it means that you are pushing decoupling to its extreme by saying you will never go back to the couple again. So if you don't go back to the couple again, in that case you will have two completely different systems. So that's the objective of the bifurcation. And this is the biggest danger that we have, because once you have established parallel standards, it's very hard to go back to one common standard. And we used to have this between the Americans and the Soviets in the 50s and in the 60s, especially concerning the space race. At that time, the Soviets were better than the Americans, so this is why Kennedy has decided to go to the moon. But the Soviets were better, and the two systems were incompatible. So we have to wait the 70s and the 80s in order to build the common space station, which is called Mir, permitting them to go together. But up to that, it was completely separate, and they were living completely separate lives. So what China is saying today to the Americans, they are telling them, look, okay, you have America first, make America great again, we don't have anything against this. However, if you are pushing us out, in that case we have to build something autonomously. In that case we have to build something which will be competitor to you. And when we build this, something which is competitor, we will go to see every country in the world, and we will tell them, now you choose. Either you take the American or you take the Chinese. That will be the danger, because you are recreating the Cold War. You are recreating a bipolar world where we have one system and when you have the other system. In order to show how China is very serious in this, they will use two things. The first one is to foster innovation, and the second one is to systematically build alternatives. So when China is fostering innovation, they're carefully choosing the most important element for them. And today it is artificial intelligence. And they're putting all their money in this field. So they have identified artificial intelligence, and they have also given goals: 2020 competitive, 2025 breakthroughs, 2030 to become the world leader. And when they decide to do something, they have the means in order to do it, because they're putting everything on the same track. It will be the university, it will be companies, it will be institutions. Everyone will work in the same direction. So they are telling the Americans, okay, you are doing your job, we are doing our job. How can we show this, especially through the patents? Here you have the number of patents registered by the United States and China in two domains. One is artificial intelligence, and the other one is deep learning. And you can see that there was a like a bifurcation in 2015, and especially in 2016 when China is skyrocketing concerning the number of applications, of patents that they have there, while the United States is a little bit stagnating. And the latest expression of this comes from China Daily, which is the main daily in PRC, which says, nation, that is China, leads the world in applications for AI patents. So it means that we have a very interesting ecosystem in China, which has been set up in order to foster artificial intelligence, and we don't have this in any other countries. So it means that they will be very much advanced. And today, if we have engineers, if we have, let's say, PhD students, and who are interested in artificial intelligence, the question is, will they go to MIT or will they go to Tsinghua? Probably they will go to Tsinghua, because this is where you will have the most investments and the most advanced artificial intelligence. For robotics, they will go somewhere else. But concerning artificial intelligence, maybe they will switch to the Chinese one. And the Chinese companies are very much present here, the bad companies, which is Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. So these three companies are leading it. Especially when we compare to Google, Google is the first American company which is present in artificial intelligence, but it is far away from the three Chinese partners that we have there. So I will not elaborate on all this because we don't have too much time on this. I will just focus on the last thing, which is building systematically alternatives. So these alternatives are very much present on the internet, and for that I will make a reference to another report. So the report is this one, the China Internet Report 2019, very interesting. Also download on the internet free of charge, etc. You will have information about what China is doing right now concerning the applications, and especially the fight with the American applications. The point that we have today is that China has built alternatives in all key verticals. On the right side, you have the American applications. On the left side, you have the Chinese applications. So it means that today, China is ready to fight frontally with the Americans, because Alibaba and Huawei will develop their own chips. Alibaba has developed Xiantier, and Huawei has developed Kirin 990, the chips which are made specifically for the 5G and artificial intelligence. And we don't have them in the United States. And Huawei has developed its own operational system. As you know, on your smartphones, we usually have two of them, iOS from Apple and Android from Google. But Huawei has developed its own OS Harmony, so it doesn't depend on Android, it doesn't depend on anything else. So now you will have a Huawei handphone, you will have Huawei chip, you will have Huawei operational system, and you will have all the Chinese applications on it. So it means that the Chinese smartphone is autonomous. It does not depend on Americans anymore. So this is the danger of the bifurcation. And if you don't depend on the Americans anymore, they will put pressure on the other countries. Now you have to choose. And they have asked the Prime Minister Li Hsien-loong, same thing in October, they asked him, now you have to choose. And he says, I don't want to choose. What will happen in the future is that everyone will have two smartphones. You will have the American one and you will have the Chinese one if you want to communicate with everyone in the world. Otherwise, you will communicate with just one part. So you will have two smartphones, not only one for business and one private, but you will have one Chinese and you will have one American. Last thing is concerning the super apps. So the super apps is something that we don't have in the United States, where you are putting on one application an unlimited number of options. So you can put on WeChat, I don't know, taxi, food delivery, etc. So one example where the Chinese are very much in advance compared to the Americans is this example, which is coming from Tencent. So Tencent will have this WeChat, and they will build Tencent now into a bank. So they will build the Tencent credit score. So the Tencent credit score is around 5 variables here in order to identify your score when you are using WeChat. It means that they know everything about you. So they have all the different options which are connecting to you, people that you are talking to, the quantity of messages, the content of the messages, etc. So this is something that we don't have in the United States. We don't have this, for instance, for WhatsApp. We don't have this for anyone else. And they are looking at what is happening in China, and maybe they will be inspired by what is happening in China. As in conclusion, because we have to stop and I cannot speak anymore. So as a conclusion for this, I would say that for geopolitics, we can have two approaches. One is permanent. So this is the permanent competition or cooperation between states and corporations. And the second thing is one conjectural element, which is the biggest geopolitical issue today. Today it is the trade war between the United States and China. Everyone is saying that China will suffer from the trade war, but I'm a little bit cautious about that, because if we are pushing China to decoupling and especially bifurcation, in that case, I'm not so sure who is going to win at the end. So this is the conversation that we